Marvel vs. Capcom was a cornerstone of the fighting game community for decades now. A beloved game that has brought some of the most explosive hype moments in fighting game tournament history. So you could only imagine the surprise everyone felt when the announcement that a new Marvel fighting game was going to be made for the first time since 2017. Almost 10 years now. At the beginning of last month in June.
I'm so sad, actually.
I'm sorry, Justin. I gotta take Storm from you, bro. That's me, bro.
Justin wants married, I'm not. Sorry.
There was just one odd little weird thing. This is a Marvel fighting game that is not being made by Capcom. That's right, Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls is Arc System Works' latest fighting game announcement. With the crisp anime-style graphics that Arc System Works has been known for since Guilty Gear Xrd and even before, to be honest. Some cool Japanese-style redesigns on classic Marvel designs, and a major change to the tag team format with an emphasis on 4-man teams. The hype for this game is through the roof. Now, there is one problem that people have with the game, despite nobody playing the game yet, and it's this moment right here. Now, if you're not a major fighting game sweat, this moment probably was pretty innocuous, but for longtime enjoyers of the genre, this moment represents one of the most divisive mechanics in a fighting game for a long time. In this video, I want to go over 3 main things. What is this actually, and how does it affect the game that it's currently in? How ArcSys kind of has a history of doing this in previous fighting games that they've made. And finally, what I think this could do in Marvel Tokon. So, what is this exactly? This is the area shift. You probably hear Guilty Gear Strive players call this wall break. Now, there are 3D fighters that have mechanics of you moving from one part of the stage to another. I played Tekken for the first time last year in Tekken 8 Season 1, and there's like a stage where you can like break through the floor and you jump down, and you go like down a couple of floors on this stage. Pretty common. Being able to do this is pretty much unheard of in 2D fighters. Anime fighters. And in this video, when I'm talking about anime fighters, I'm talking about like 2D anime graphics rather than like your arena fighters like Bleach or like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Now, these fighting games are really known for their oppressive offense. So the typical flow of a match would go something like this. Players go back and forth in neutral, so this is when no one is straight up attacking each other directly, they're just kind of vying for space. Somebody scores a hit somehow, and depending on how the game is made, they convert that hit into a combo. Now, if the character is any good, this combo will lead to some sort of advantage state, usually a knockdown in most fighting games. And from there, the player can use that advantage to set up further special strong offense. And there could be all sorts of tricky stuff you can do in this situation. Now, Guilty Gear in particular is pretty known for this tricky style of offense as well. So in Guilty Gear Strive, Arc System Works added a mechanic where you also deal damage to the corner while you're doing a combo. After the corner takes a specific amount of damage, and the game gives you a little bit of a cue because you could see cracks in the corner will break and then you move to a different part of the stage. Right now the wall is generally broken in 2 main ways. If you end with anything that's not a super, you reset to round start neutral, but at a slightly further position than normal. If you end with a super, however, you get a hard knockdown with a set amount of advantage to keep up your offense. Regardless of how you break the wall, you also gain a positive bonus, a passive buff to defense and damage output at 10%, as well as passive meter gain and passive burst gain for 5 seconds. Now remember this because this will be important for later in the video. How does this mechanic affect Guilty Gear Strive though? In its current form, the wall break adds some pretty specific questions to a player's combo routing that does not exist in other games. In most games, you consider your current status, things like HP, resource, what character you're playing, and the type of knockdown you did. And you're also considering your opponent's HP, resource, character, and any specifics they might have to counter what you want to do. And the latter 2 are quite important. Here's a situation in EVO Grand Finals where I tested the best player of this game if he knew how to get out of this setup because there was only one way out, and surprise, he's the best, he knew. But I had the time to think about it during the combo first. Previous game, Guilty Gear Xrd, has a universal parry mechanic that costs 25 meters, so if you play a character that uses a projectile to set up, which is reasonably common in the game, You have to consider this mechanic on knockdown in combination with things like meterless reversals, special properties they might have like how quickly they get up, how much invincibility their backdash has, and more. In this simple example, I'm able to do setup pretty freely to Sin because his wake up speed is slow. Against the fast rise of Venom combined with his teleport, this setup will never work. So of course, Strive is a pretty standard 2D fighter, so you make these choices, but you also have to consider the wall and what the wall break gives you as well. First question is, do you even want to break the wall? Let's say you're playing as a character that is pretty dominant in a neutral game versus yours. Do you actually want to break that wall ASAP? Maybe not. Maybe you want the hard knockdown to guarantee offense, so you restructure your combos so that it ends early, so you can build a little bit more resource beforehand to break the wall with super, which guarantees you a hard knockdown. A common tactic in earlier versions of the game was to take advantage of wall slumping, keeping your mix-up on the wall until you got the resource that you wanted. It's less effective now since burst gets refunded to the player getting hit on wall stick, but you still see it every now and then with a couple of characters. But what if you play a character with an amazing neutral game? You probably want to break the wall quite a bit more, as the passive meter gain, passive damage, and passive defense buff can be extremely rewarding if you're able to go from neutral to offense quickly. Another question you have to ask is what's going on with your combo breaker, burst. There are cases where you might want to break the wall ASAP to get your burst back, as burst is one of the best ways to mitigate bad situations in the game, and you may or may not know this, the damage in Guilty Gear Strive is kind of high. You can even use your burst against the opponent using Wild Assault, a mechanic that costs half your burst, using it to close rounds or guaranteeing yourself positive while making it so your opponent cannot reverse the situation with their own burst. Surprisingly, breaking the wall with super varies by character, but the universal thing is that the player who gets knocked down is closer to the wall than normal. Typically, you won't see this looped multiple times unless the character on the receiving end has particularly high HP because, hate to say it, the damage in Guilty Gear Strive is high. Out of all the mechanics that have been revised and changed in Guilty Gear Strive, I think Wall Break in particular stands out the most. There are many changes to this game compared to its previous iteration. Universal wake-up speeds and weight, as opposed to the wake-up speeds being very individualized and having multiple weight classes. General homogenization of backdashes and Gatlings. I actually posted a video, I want to say a couple weeks ago now, about how I think the Gatling change is one of the best changes they made to Guilty Gear Strive. If you're curious on why, you can check that out. But to be honest, you have to play Guilty Gear to feel a lot of these changes. And some of them will stand out even more the better you are at the game. So if you're like a beginner, things like Gatlings and FD changes are pretty quickly noticeable. But you might not think too much about the wake-up speeds, but if you're a more advanced player, then you'll definitely feel things like backdash and the wake-up speeds. But I think specifically wall break, that's something any fighting game player, I mean, to be honest, anyone who's played or watched a fighting game can clearly see is a change to the typical flow of what a 2D fighter is. Wall break is a very dramatic example, but it's not like it's the first time that ArcSys has done this. So I've played a lot of fighting games in my time, and a bunch of them are Arc System Works games. So I really like comparing the games. I consider BlazBlue, Persona 4 Arena, and Guilty Gear to kind of be like their core games. Of course, there's stuff like Dragon Ball FighterZ and Grand Blue as well to always look at, but I usually end up comparing BlazBlue, Guilty Gear, and Persona. Now, BlazBlue and Persona have very different knockdown systems from Guilty Gear. But what they have in common specifically is a distinction between knockdowns and the ability to delay wake up. Combining these things can sometimes help you get out of really sticky situations. BlazBlue in particular really stands out here because there's rolling options. So you can roll away from the opponent, towards the opponent, get up in place, and even do like a fast wake up that has like no invincibility and is very fast, let's say. Let's not get into reaction wars in this video. Applied well, you can force your opponent to change up their offense when you're knocked down sometimes. Now, I played both BlazBlue and Persona from release, and specifically with BlazBlue, this game got very flamed for its roll system. A lot of Guilty Gear players at that time, along with many accusations of why BlazBlue is a baby game, accused the game of simplifying the knockdown too much by not giving this guaranteed knockdown situation. As Guilty Gear, even though the characters get up at different speeds, if you can knock them down, they're just knocked down. You can set up the situation that you want based on the character that you're playing and how you did your thing. And to be fair to them, the knockdown system in BlazBlue Calamity Trigger is not great. I actually made a video on Blaze Blue Calamity Trigger kind of as a whole, and I talk about the roll knockdown system, so you can also check that out if you want. But these things got changed over time, including some characters having the ability to 50-50 you out of their roll. Funny enough, with Persona, it didn't really get flamed for the knockdown system, probably because there was no rolls really, and in that game you cannot backdash on wake up unless you are a robot named Aegis in Orgia mode. The knockdown system shared a lot of things with Blaze Blue, mostly in that you could delay your wake ups and like take hits on purpose to get out of sticky situations, but that was about it. And one of the things that game actually ended up being known for was, surprise, its strong knockdown offense. Point being that people generally push back against new systems that doesn't line up with their original experience until players kind of play the game and flesh stuff out. Maybe it'll take a couple of versions for developers to change certain properties about things. So with all that, this brings us to Marvel, the new game. What could they possibly do with wall break, area shift, whatever you want to call it, in this game? If you remember previously, the Strive wall break resets to neutral or gives you a universal knockdown while buffing your character passively in a significant way for 5 seconds. I think this is an insane idea for a tag fighter. For starters, what type of buffs could a character or team get? Things like damage, defense, and meter are pretty much expected. You've seen this in games like DBFZ with Sparking and Marvel vs. Capcom 3 with X Factor. A lot of people have actually been theorizing that this game will have a shared health bar because of how many characters are on a team. And damage has always been a huge part of team fighters because, frankly, the power level in these games are also high. So while doing damage is always important in any fighting game, it's even more important in a tag fighter because killing a character means your opponent can just do less. They get less mix-up opportunities. They get to do less things in neutral with assists. They get to cycle HP less because they can't heal as much because they don't have as many characters to swap, etc, etc. Meter ties into this as well. It helps with damage. It helps with finishing your opponent off with many supers. It helps with switching characters if that game has that style of meter spend. If the game allows it, it lets you use powered up versions of moves. And defensively, the additional meter gives you access to defensive mechanics that can keep a comeback from occurring. I also think they could add something that would be unique to the game. And it's a really cursed idea, but it is ASW, so I do think they would do something like this. And my thought is little or no cooldown for assists. The main thing being that Strive is the second game I played that's had this like neutral reset idea, the first one being Dragon Ball FighterZ. And from these two games, I learned fighting game players really don't need a lot of incentive to have this neutral reset. So you remember the wall slump tactic I talked about earlier? Even after buffs to positive bonus and fast roaming cancel in Season 2, choosing to hold the wall or do a wall slump when possible was still one of the most common options for Oki for a character. That's how much people value control on knockdown. So that's why I think this is probably one of the main things they might give you, because they want to encourage you to actually use the wall break. Keep in mind that for Dragon Ball FighterZ, for example, assist cooldowns are very long for a tag fighter. Typical assist cooldown is 8 frames, but if you use the C-type assist, because in Dragon Ball you can choose 3 assists per each character, the cooldowns are even longer at 12 seconds. But when you enter Sparking, you do get a buff to assists. Assist cooldowns can recover even while hitting your opponent, which you can't do normally. And this specific factor of Sparking enables TODs like these. Getting access to something like that, or even something further than that, would be incredibly powerful, even if the only way you can area shift is by resetting to neutral. Especially with the amount of assists that seem to be able to be called, potentially some wild combinations of neutral into mix-up will be possible. Now, the normal pushback that I've heard in my time playing fighting games is usually something along the lines of, why gatekeep the coolness of a game around a mechanic or status or whatever? Why not just let people do it from the jump? And in my opinion, there's 2 big reasons. So one, and this one's probably a little controversial, I think fighting games need rules. Personally, I usually think the less rules a fighting game has, the less like laws the fighting games have, the more broken it is, and I don't think it's fun for the game to just be broken. And many people do literally whatever they want, makes the power level very, very high. This will appeal to some people, but I don't think it appeals to everyone, and I usually pass on games like this. And the second reason is kind of looping back to before. To do something like this, which is like giving up your advantage to go back to neutral, players need a massive incentive to do it. Because essentially you're giving up something that is typically expected as a reward for getting hit, which is further offense. This was my personal frustration of Dragon Ball FighterZ for a long time. And it also led me to craft the teams that I crafted near the end of my time playing. To the point that many players said I solved the game by building these teams. But in the end, I wanted to just feel like I got more of a reward for getting the initial hit than I did with other characters that I played. And I think little to no assist cooldown could probably be one of the main ways Arc System Works want to encourage players to interact with this small but important system mechanic. But yeah, anyway, let me know what you guys think. I've been mulling on this for a while now, especially after just getting over the fact that this game even exists in the first place. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to the comment section below. If you want to support the channel, best way to do it is by joining my Patreon over at patreon.com/LordKnight. I also coach Guilty Gear on other fighting games in general on Metafy at metafy.gg/LordKnight. I stream on most days, basically on weekdays at twitch.tv/LordKnight. We practice, hang out, and record videos for my second channel, LordKnight Chronicles, over on there. So go check that out too. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.